All right, so one of my favorite things are inexpensive DIY tips and ideas that allow you to have a really creative look to your photography. Now, I shot these headshots right here, what I call cinematic headshots, and it was actually the background. If you keep an eye on the background stays the same, but it offers a very unique look with a lot of bokeh, as you can see, but it's something different than I normally shoot, and I'm going to show you the cheap little $9 item that I bought, which was the backdrop for this particular shot, but I'm also going to show you exactly how I shot it in case you wanted to replicate this look or use this for inspiration for your creative photography. So this is going to be a video on what I call cinematic headshots and exactly how I shot it. Hey everyone, it's Mike here from Mike McGee Photography. Okay, so you saw some of the samples in the intro of exactly the type of background that I use for these shots that you're looking at right now, but how did I shoot them? Well, the backdrop that I used was actually some foil Mylar thermal rescue blankets. Not kidding. This was actually the backdrop that I used for those particular shots. Now, I've seen people use aluminum foil. That works. I actually found that these Mylar blankets work best simply because when you use foil, you can't really reuse it. You can't fold it up and then tuck it away and then reuse it. So if a client sees those shots on your website or in your portfolio and says, wow, I want to book that guy, I want to do headshots like that, it's a little hard to replicate because you're going to have to just break out the foil and it's kind of a pain. So these guys are nice because, again, they're non-destructive. So once you fold it up, tuck them away, you can just break them out at any time and reuse them for that particular type of backdrop setup. Now, one of the key differences with foil is that foil is more stiff, so it can create great peaks and valleys, and that's what creates that bokeh in the background, those little soft circular depth of field type coziness that allows you to have, lights flickering in the background. It's bokeh. So that really works well with this particular look, especially when you shoot colored gel strobes into it. So all that light that you see, the purple colors that you see in the different variations of, let's say, red in some of them or blue in another. Now, that's actually the same backdrop, the same simple backdrop, and then all I did was I shot 45 degrees, I shot two colored strobes right into them. And it's maybe not 45 degrees, it's probably at a little stiffer angle to really accentuate those peaks and valleys and get that bokeh. So my goal for this video is to show you exactly how I shot that, show you the lighting setup, show you the camera, the lens, the actual f-stop, the aperture, everything, so that in case you want to replicate that particular look with some emergency blankets, and you'll be able to do so. So let's get started. All right, here I am in my studio in a wider setup so you can see everything exactly how I set up this shot. I'm in some horrible lighting, by the way, because I just got to blast some soft boxes, so whatever. But you get the idea. So I'm going to show you from start to finish how I set up that shot. Now, if you look at the original cinematic headshot that I did, it's actually a 5-light setup. Now, if you're new to photography or you're beginning and you think, oh, that's a 5-light setup, it's super complicated, it's actually not. It's not that bad. I'm gonna break it down step by step so you don't have to worry about, well, how do I dial in the lights? How do I do this? The whole point is it's really just 3 sections of lights. You're gonna have your background section, and so those are 2 lights that I spoke of before, where you're gonna have that Mylar material that's all crumpled up, and then those 2 lights are gonna be at a severe angle so that they shoot almost, I'm going to say almost sideways, to really capture the peaks and valleys of the Mylar material so that it captures bokeh when it's softened out at one of the larger apertures. So that is the 2 lights to start with as your background lights. Now, for the headshot, it's really just going to be a key light. So now you have 1 key light, just a giant softbox that I'm going to use as a key light. You have that one set up, and then I'm going to put a reflector down below. Now, some people consider that a light, even though it's not lit up. So it's a 5 or a 6 light setup, if you want to call it. I call it a 5 plus. I don't consider a reflector a true light, but it's kind of like a plus, right? So that way in my head, I know, what am I plugging in? I'm plugging in 5 strobes plus a reflector. So I call it a 5 plus. That's just the way I talk. So now that's your key light for the headshot with a reflector below. So now that's your 3rd light. So you got 2, 3. Now for your option, this is just an option, I added 2 kicker lights. Those are colored gel kicker lights behind the model so that it shoots at a 45-degree angle, sort of getting that nice rim lighting, which is, I put colored gels on. So we're putting colored gels on the backdrop. So let's say it's a gold backdrop, then you may want to have either gold or maybe just clear. You could have clear highlights to sort of differentiate and separate the client from the backdrop, or to play into the color palette. So if it's, let's say, a purple backdrop, you might want to go with kicker lights on the sides that have a complementary color tone. Let's say it's gold, Lakers colors. I'm not a Lakers fan, but hey, you get it. So purple and gold on the color wheel. Just look on the color wheel of what are some complementary colors. And of course, there's the classic teal and orange. If you go teal background, maybe you'll have some orange kickers. Those just sort of make it an even more impactful and sort of a wow factor for those headshots. And that's the whole point of this video, to make like a cinematic headshot that really pops. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get started, break it down step by step, and I'm going to start by just putting up the Mylar material, and then you can just watch me set up the lights, and I'll explain as I go through. All right, so let's set up this Mylar material, okay? Again, it's just like, it's foil rescue blankets. That's what it is on Amazon. Now these are pretty large, so let me pull one out. I'm 6'3", so just to give you a heads up, it's a pretty, one of these, if you can even hear me under the crackle. Like I said, I'm about 6'3". It's about 6 feet, yeah, in height, and I don't know, about 5 feet wide or something like that. So that's just one sheet. I'm gonna probably use 2 for this one, and here's the key. It doesn't have to be precise. In fact, the less precise it is, the better. So the way I usually do things is a little masking tape. I just grab a ton of masking tape, and this is how I do it. I just stick it on my leg, so it's got easy access. Stick it all over. This is some true photographer stuff. We don't care. I mean, all you need is the final shot. It doesn't really matter the smoke and mirrors that takes place behind the shot that makes it happen. So you don't have to be precise when you're applying this. You just want to make sure that it's actually covering the viewfinder with the Mylar material. So you want to give it a nice crunch. Crunch it all up. The higher the peaks and valleys, that's actually the better it's going to look with that bokeh. It's going to be more impactful bokeh when you crunch it all up. So I'm going to crunch this up. Hopefully the mic won't get a little crazy on you, but let's give it a whirl, and then I'll just put some up. So there you have it. There's one. I'm going to probably use 2 for this series. Maybe 3, I don't know. I'll just use 2. So this is what it looks like when they come out. I've already used one in the past, so that was there. When they come out of the little pack, again, it's a 10 pack. It's really nice. Each individual Ziploc packages, and all you do is just pull it out. They're completely flat and perfect. And our goal is to make it absolutely imperfect. I'm gonna go back and finish the job. All right, so there you can see, that is the backdrop that I'm gonna use. This looks like a mess. It won't matter. It's actually fine. The only thing you want to keep in mind is there's going to be a gap, obviously, when you're using 2 sheets, right? So you just want to make sure that you don't put a piece of masking tape like right in the middle, because that'll show up in the frame. And oftentimes the model is going to, if you can position them smack dab, or the client is going to be positioned smack dab in the center of this, so their head will be right here. You're probably not going to see any of that anyway. And even in post, if you saw something, you could just go boop, boop, get it out. It's fine. But this is your basic backdrop setup for the cinematic headshots. So now on to the background lights. All right, so for the background lights, I'm just going to be using some Digibees from Paul C. Buff. I have some barn doors, a reflector with some barn doors attached, as well as a colored gel dome. I'm going to use purple for the backdrop of this. If you're wondering, how did you get these colored gel domes applied to the Digibee? I'll put that in the upper right hand corner. I made a separate video on a little hack that's pretty easy to use colored gel domes with the Digibees. You can take a look at that, but it's fantastic, by the way. I use them all the time now. So all I want to do is position each Digibee, like I said, at a pretty severe angle. So I'm just going to grab this right here, and I'm going to put it like, again, almost sideways, just so it kind of catches some of those valleys. And I'm going to arrange that probably like that. Let me set that up. If I put on the modeling lamp, you guys can see what I'm talking about a little bit. I doubt it. There's too many lights in the studio for you to actually see. I got 2 extra lights set up, but maybe you can see a little bit. It actually looks pretty lame when it's just set up from the behind the scenes. But don't forget, with that depth of field and the wider aperture, all this becomes blurred out, and that's where the blur marks, the little peaks and valleys, become little dots, those soft little circular bits of bokeh. So that's what's going to happen. So you want to capture it sort of on that side, because if I do it straight on, it doesn't really capture the same amount of peaks and valleys. It's almost like when you do side lighting on a model, and if their skin isn't perfect, you can really see those imperfections in skin when light is hitting it on the sides, because it almost makes like the surface of the skin, the pores and any sort of blemishes really stand out because of the shadows that it creates. So it's the same concept. We're shooting it almost sideways so that it goes at a bit of an angle like that, and I'm going to arrange the other light the exact same way. So there you have it for the background lights. I'm going to go over the power settings that I have for each at the very end, just so you can see it on screen. But right now, sometimes it takes a little bit of a little bit of play in seeing exactly how much bokeh you want or how severe the bokeh is based on the power of the light. Sometimes actually reducing the power creates more shadows or just more differences of bright versus dark, which is what is going to make those circular little soft spots. So right now, this is what it looks like with the modeling lamps on. I'm going to go ahead and kill those because I don't necessarily need those for the shot, but you get an idea visually on the basic setup for the 2 background lights. All right, well, you can't really have a key light setup without some sort of model. So this is our model for today. It's my mannequin that I use all the time in studio for dialing in light before clients show up, or if I'm gonna do a test shoot and do some creative light work, I'll maybe practice in studio by myself until I dial in all those lights and kind of crazy configurations. So I would highly recommend having a mannequin in your studio if you wanna do some testing. So anyway, for demonstration purposes, she's going to be our model today, and I'm going to go ahead and, as you can see, I just have the mannequin on a couple of apple boxes. I just wanted a height that was a little bit lower than me. If I turn them to the side, then she'll be a little too tall, and I'm just lazy. So anyway, this is the setup for the mannequin. I'm going to go ahead and push her out a little bit farther, probably. Then we're going to go all the way out to about here, maybe right about there. So this is where she's going to be in her positioning, and now it's a matter of setting up a key light. Now my studio is fairly small. I can't go too wide in the shot and capture everything, so I'm going to use a Paul C. Buff Einstein with one of their, I think it's a 47-inch octabox. So I'm going to have a large octabox as the key light for this, and I'm going to position it about, above the model's eye, just about 45 degrees up, and then I like to have that little like kind of crescent moon kind of vibe, like about half of the octabox ends up in the catch light. That's what I usually go for, maybe half, maybe a little bit more, just depends. But I'm gonna go ahead and set up that key light, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so now that I have the key light set up, for this particular model position, I have model about 10 feet, maybe 10 to 11 feet away from the wall. You want that distance. You don't want to be right against the wall, otherwise you won't get that shallow depth of field. That will be in focus, and it'll look like Mylar, actually, like an emergency blanket. You don't want it to look like an emergency blanket. The farther away you can get your client or model away from the wall, the more bokeh, the more blur you're gonna have. So we're gonna use that in conjunction with a higher aperture. So Once I have the key light set up, which I do, now the next step is, remember I told you there is a reflector involved as well. So I just have a cheap little reflector stand right here. Grab one of these cheap reflectors. I'm just gonna use the silver side. Kind of bring this in right here. One sec. I'm gonna turn this out. I usually clip in the base section down here, and then all you need to do is just, depending upon the size of your reflector, you just dial this in, go like that. So now the reflector is intact. Tighten this thing down, tighten it down, tighten it down. And so really all you want to do is make sure that you have a nice little kickback onto the client or the model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise this up. I usually like to have it to where it's, if we're doing just headshots like we're doing, I will have that reflector all the way like somebody's playing drums. It's almost like they're going to be like right at the belly button. You're going to have that reflector because you want it as close as you can get to the shot, but not being in the shot. Even if you get a tiny bit in the shot, you can just crop it down a little bit. You want to get it as close as possible to really accentuate that catch light and give a nice amount of fill. So let me go ahead and I'm just gonna turn this up. One sec. Give one click up. There we go. And for the angle, I usually don't have it just flat because then it kind of bounces and the light's gonna just spread out a little bit more. I want it to really bounce. It's like pool, it's like playing pool. It's physics of light, right? So you're gonna have it bounce and you almost want to bounce back into your subject. So you wanna have just a slight angle back. You don't wanna go too much, obviously, because then you won't catch any light. Just a little bit of light going right back to your client or your model, right about there. Then I'm gonna lift that up, right about there. And so, that looks about right. So if she was playing the drums, that's probably pretty good. And yeah, so now we have two rear lights set up for the backdrop. Got the key light, got the reflector, and optionally we can add those color gels on the sides. Okay, now that we have the background light set up, the key light, the reflector, and we have our model in position, I usually then just add these kicker lights. Now I'm gonna have an Einstein on each side, so pointing about 45 degrees towards the back shoulder of the model. And in this case, I have a small gridded soft box. It's really just a strip box that's on the back here. And so I usually aim that again towards the shoulder of the client, almost like you're hitting the back of the head. You don't want to almost aim at the nose or something like that, because you actually don't want to capture any light that's hitting the nose. You want that rim line to be on the edges of each side. So I usually aim it farther back than you think, not even directly at the model's ear or something like that. You kind of almost want to aim it at like the back shoulder. And then the grid on that keeps that light focused so that it doesn't spread out too much, because you kind of want it in a distinct area. So usually bring in one, probably put it right about there. I'm gonna put one right about here. So you got both of those about 45 degrees. You can still see me. Yeah, so that's it. And you might think, wow, that's really close. But yeah, that's how I usually do it. Especially if you have colored gels, the farther away you have lights when colored gels are on there, usually the color just, it doesn't have the vibrancy that it has when it's right on top of somebody. So you almost want it, the way I do it, I have it right at the edge of the frame. Sometimes these lights are in the shot and you just have to do it in post, but I try to get it as close as into the viewfinder as possible without, it's like Price is Right, closest to the original price without going over. I want to just get it right in there without getting into the frame as much as possible. So this is the basic 5-light setup. I'll go through the power settings of each one. I'm going to do a couple of test fires, and then I'll give the summary. Right now, since this video is primarily about the background, I'm going to focus on just the background. So that means I'm going to turn off both kicker lights as well as the key light. So the only lights that are on are the two background lights. I'm just going to do a test fire right now. Okay, and then what happens right there is that, as you can see, I don't have anything illuminating the key light or the kicker lights, but that's exactly what I want. So I want to be able to just dial in if something is a little too hot. Like for example, that light on the left is a little bit brighter than the light on the right. So if I wanted to balance that out a little bit more, I could move that digibee that's on the background. I can move that in just a tad to have a little bit more balance to the light, but overall, I think that looks pretty good because you have to remember this is going to be like layers to a cake. It's not going to be just isolated like this. So for the time being, you might think, wow, that looks a little dark, but don't forget, you're gonna have a key light and then some kicker lights, which are gonna illuminate everything. So you want that background to be a little bit unique and you don't want it blown out with highlights that lose detail. All right, so I have each one of those Einsteins that are set up as my gridded strip boxes for the kickers. I have each one of those set up, and let's just do a test fire. I don't have any colored gels on there, but let's do a quick test fire and see how the lights perform. All right, now you can see that's a little too much for my taste. I think the lights are a little too hot. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna reduce the power a bit, and when I reduce the power to my liking, I'll kind of dial that in, and then I'll show you my results. All right, that looks a lot better, kind of a softer look of just highlights without being too hot and distracting on the model's face. So now, last step, let's dial in the key light. All right, so now that I've fired up the key light, let's do a test shot. All right, as you can see, that's pretty blown out. Obviously, I'm gonna reduce the power of the key light. I'm gonna reduce that a bit. Let's make it like -6.5 and see how that looks. All right, that's much, much better. That's definitely the kind of look that we're going for. And if you noticed in the back of the background, there's kind of purple bokeh on each side, but there's kind of a strip in the middle that has a little bit of, it's kind of not really catching the purple gel. So what I'll probably do is I'll just go scrunch it up a little bit more right dead center so that it captures a little bit more of that purple and has more of a uniformed look to the backdrop. All right, so after scrunching up the background a bit, I kind of moved the lights a little bit more, even more sideways. And then I thought that made a more uniformed feel for the backdrop. And as you can see, I think the results are pretty spot on for what I was looking for. You got a nice balance of light with the key lights. Those kickers are working pretty nicely, especially on camera left. And you got a nice little purple bokeh background that you can just easily swap out with different colored gels. So after the lights are all dialed in, the beauty of this background system is that all you have to do is pop out these colored gel domes like this, and then you can just have a dramatically different backdrop with just the simple switch of a colored gel. So for example, you could shoot purple, then we can go to red, and we can go to teal, or we could go to yellow. Possibilities are endless. You can even obviously mix and match just to kind of mix it up, and then again, that's just the background. Then you can add these colored gel domes to the kicker lights of your model on the sides right here to add a little bit more complementary color palette action and a little emphasis on the color and the impact of the bokeh, as well as your model sort of having that cinematic look. All right, so there you have it. That is how to shoot cinematic headshots with a lot of color and impact, all with a $9 thermal blanket set. Who would have thought? Anyway, hopefully you like this video. Hopefully you can use it in your photography. If you like this video, click a thumbs up. If you have any questions, feel free to ask any questions in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. And if you like this video and maybe want to see more, just hit the subscribe button. I don't know if it's that way. Hit the subscribe button, and I'll do my best to come up with some more videos and show you demonstrations on how I shoot the things I shoot, and hopefully you'll enjoy them. So thanks for watching.